I didn't believe in cursed places. I believed in coordinates, soil samples, and carbon dating. We were 3 people on that mountain: me, Dr. Keller, and Anna. Our grant proposal called it Survey of Isolated High-Altitude Burial Sites in Disused Pilgrimage Routes. Keller just called it the Cemetery on the Spine of the World. We reached it late afternoon after hours of switchbacks and loose rock. The trail narrowed until it was just a ledge, and then suddenly the mountain opened into a plateau. The wind dropped. The silence hit like a wall. The cemetery spread out in front of us. Rough headstones, most of them unmarked or worn smooth, stood in crooked rows. Some leaned so far they looked ready to fall. Others seemed too neatly placed, like someone had recently straightened them. The ground was a patchwork of frost, dead grass, and bare earth. "There shouldn't be this many," Keller murmured. "The records mention a small family plot. This is dozens." Anna lifted her camera, the shutter clicking in short bursts. "Locals said nobody comes here anymore," she said. "They say the mountain chooses who stays." I rolled my eyes. "Locals also said don't whistle after midnight or the wind gets offended." Still, I couldn't deny it. Something felt wrong. The scale, the layout, the way the headstones seemed to subtly face us, no matter which angle we took. We split up to work. Keller started sketching the overall layout, pacing and counting. Anna moved along the perimeter, taking wide shots. I began with the nearest grave, brushing moss away to look for any carving. The first few were old, barely legible dates from the 1800s, names worn down to ghosts. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Footprints, not ours. They circled one of the graves in irregular loops, as if someone had walked around it again and again, stopping, hesitating, changing direction. The prints were sharp, recent. The edges of the impressions were still crisp in the frost. "Keller?" I called. "Did someone come up here before us?" "No one's been on this trail in years," he replied, not looking up. "At least officially." I followed the footprints with my eyes. They led up from the path we'd used, but there were no corresponding prints going back down. It was as if someone had walked in and never left. "Guys," Anna said, her voice tight, "I think some of these graves moved." I joined her. She was pointing at a patch of earth where the grass was torn and a rectangular stain marked the ground like an old footprint, but bigger, deeper. Nearby, a headstone sat crooked, dirt still piled fresh around its base. "It was here," Anna said, kneeling to check the indent in the soil. "This stone used to be here. Somebody dug it up and relocated it." "Recently," Keller added, crouching, "this soil hasn't settled yet." "Who would move a grave up here?" I asked. Keller didn't answer. The sun scraped the mountaintops, bleeding orange into gray. Shadows stretched long. The air felt heavier. "Let's document as much as we can before dark," Keller said. "We finish at the far row and head back to camp. No heroics." I worked faster, scribbling notes, photographing stones, old names, faded symbols, crosses, circles. Some graves had no markers at all, just a stone driven into earth. Near the far edge of the cemetery, I came across a cluster of newer-looking headstones, the stone lighter and less eroded. They were grouped close together, like a family. 3 graves, fresh earth, no moss. I swallowed. "Hey," I called. "I think someone's still using this place." Anna and Keller joined me. The 3 headstones stood in a slight arc, facing the drop off the mountain. Thin lines of frost traced the edges of the carved letters. The dates were recent. Very recent. The names made my brain stutter. Anna M. Rodriguez, Dr. Richard Keller, Luke A. Harris. My throat closed. "This is not funny," I rasped. Anna let out a bitter laugh that cracked halfway through. "You think I hiked 3 hours up a mountain to pull a prank on myself?" Keller's face had drained of color. He ran his fingers over his own name, tracing it like he needed to prove it was real. The date of death, on all 3 stones, was blank, just a carved line. Waiting. "There must be another explanation," I said. "We're not the only Luke, Anna, and Richard in the world. It's a coincidence. Someone carved generic names. It's pareidolia. It's..." "Full names," Keller cut in. "Middle initials. Exact spelling. Do you really believe that?" My hand shook as I reached for my phone. No signal, of course, but the GPS should still log coordinates. The screen was black. I held the power button. Nothing. "Phone dead?" Anna asked. "Battery was at 82% an hour ago," I said. She checked hers. Same result. Keller's too. Something shifted in the air, like the mountain had exhaled. All around us, the ground seemed disturbed. Little cracks in the frost. Patches of soil puffed up, not settled. The graves we'd walked past looked different, like their positions had changed a few inches when we weren't looking. "We're leaving," Keller said suddenly. His voice had an edge I'd never heard in the lab. "Now. Lights going. We don't camp near this place." We turned toward the trail. It wasn't there. The ledge we'd used to reach the plateau was gone, replaced by a steep drop into cloud. In its place, the cemetery stretched farther than before, stones marching into the mist. "That's not possible," Anna whispered. "It was right here." We split up instinctively, each scanning for the cut in the rock, for footprints leading back. There was nothing. Only graves. I felt watched. The wind picked up, but the trees below didn't move. The sound didn't come from them. It came from under our feet. A slow, dry shifting, like wood or bone settling. A faint tap, tap, tap from inside coffins that shouldn't exist. "This is altitude sickness," I muttered. "Hypoxia. We said we'd watch for it. We said..." Something crunched behind me. I turned. Our 3 graves were closer. I swear they had been 10 meters away. Now they waited just a few steps off, the soil around them disturbed, the stones leaning forward like listeners. Our death dates were no longer blank. Today's date was carved in, the grooves fresh and dark. I stumbled back. "We didn't hear carving," I said wildly. "We didn't hear anything," Anna screamed. I spun toward her voice. She was standing at the edge of another row of headstones pointing down. Her face was white. Every stone in that row had new names. Our families, our emergency contacts, names we'd written on the forms months ago. My mother, my brother. Under each name, the same location was etched: Forgotten Cemetery, North Ridge. "They shouldn't know this," Keller said. His eyes were wet. "Those forms are in the university office. Nobody else saw them." The tapping grew louder. I looked down. Between the cracks in the earth, something pale shifted and fell dust. Finger bones. They were pushing upward, blindly like roots searching for light. "We are not staying here," Keller said, grabbing my arm. "It's a trick of the light, of the mind. We walk straight until we find the tree line. The mountain isn't infinite." We started walking, not toward any visible trail, just away from the densest cluster of graves. The wind roared in our ears. The sky turned from gray to nearly black in minutes. We walked for what felt like an hour. The graves never thinned. Every few steps, I saw our 3 stones at the corner of my vision. No matter which direction we turned, they were always there, patiently waiting. At some point, we stopped talking. The tapping had become a steady pattern beneath us, like hundreds of fingers drumming in unison. When Anna finally fell to her knees sobbing, the sound stopped. Silence slammed down. Then softly, a new sound rose from the earth. Scratching. Slow. Deliberate. It moved toward us. "We lie down," Keller said suddenly, voice flat. "We lie down, we close our eyes, it stops. It's an offering, a trade." He sounded almost relieved. "Are you insane?" I shouted. He smiled faintly. "Check the stones again. It's not just us. It's everyone we've ever brought to a site like this. Everyone who trusted us. The mountain wants balance." He walked toward our 3 graves. "Anna, stop him!" I yelled. But she was looking at another stone, one with a small name on it, one I recognized from the way her shoulders shook. Her younger sister, born years ago, date of death, today. She took a step toward the grave. I didn't follow them. I ran. I don't remember how I found the trail again. At some point the graves blurred into rock, the frost into scree. The wind became wind again. I fell more than I walked, hands bleeding, lungs burning. When I finally looked back, the plateau was gone, swallowed by cloud. Rescue teams never found Keller and Anna. The official story says they must have fallen or gotten lost in a sudden storm. The university offered counseling. They put up a plaque. I went back to my apartment, printed the photos from my camera. Somehow, impossibly, it had turned on again once I was off the mountain. Most shots were static or corrupted. Just one came out clear. 3 headstones. Our names. Today's date. And at the bottom of the frame, carved into the stone where there'd been nothing before, a line that wasn't in any language I knew. But I understand it anyway. It means, you left, but you didn't go. The call came in the middle of the night. A group of hikers had sent a half-finished distress message from the North Ridge before their radio cut out. High winds, low visibility, possible injury. Coordinates were near an old mark on our maps. Cemetery, disused. We knew the spot. Everyone in the rescue unit did. We also knew what the older guys said about it when they thought we weren't listening. Don't linger up there. Don't count the graves out loud. Don't read the names. I thought it was just mountain folklore, until we went. There were 4 of us on the team. Me, Torres, Silva, and the new guy, Ramos. We took the jeep as far as the frozen track allowed, then continued on foot, headlamps cutting weak tunnels through the fog. "Signal came from just ahead of the cemetery marker," Torres said, checking the GPS. "If they're smart, they sheltered near the stones. The ground's more even there." "Assuming they didn't fall off the ridge," Silva muttered. The higher we climbed, the quieter it got. The wind died, but the fog thickened until it felt like we were walking inside a lung. Our breath bounced back at us. Then, all at once, the whiteness thinned. We stepped into the cemetery. Even in bad light, it looked wrong. Row after row of crooked headstones, some half-buried, some toppled, some standing too straight. No fence, no trees, just rock and graves. The mountain dropped away steeply on one side, a sheer black absence. "Anyone here?" I shouted. My voice went nowhere. No echo. We split up to search, staying within sight of each other. Radios on, protocol. I found the first set of footprints near a large stone cross. Boot marks, shallow but recent, leading from the trail into the cemetery. Relief punched through my chest. "Got tracks," I said into the radio. "At least one person came this way." "Multiple here," Torres replied. "Looks like 3 or 4 sets, spread out." The prints looped around graves, stopped, backtracked. It looked like the hikers had tried to read the stones. Maybe they were looking for a name, a year, a clue. Then one set just ended. In the middle of 2 graves. No slide, no fall. Just a final step, and then nothing. "Torres," I said, "you seeing any sign of a fall? Rope marks? Blood?" "Negative," he answered, but his voice had dipped. "Something's off with the layout. Ramos says the graves don't match the old maps." "They moved graves?" Silva cut in. "Who the hell hikes up here to do that?" My headlamp caught a headstone directly ahead, its surface oddly clean. I wiped frost from it, expecting a weather-ruined name, some ancient date. I froze. The inscription was sharp, fresh, Sargento Marcos Vieira. That was me, same spelling, same rank. The date of birth was correct. The date of death was empty. My tongue felt too big in my mouth. "Guys?" I said softly. "Yeah?" Ramos replied. "Check the newer-looking stones," I whispered. "The ones that look like they don't belong." There was a silence on the radio that went on too long. Then Silva swore. "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing," Torres said. "Mine's here. Full name, same birthday, death date blank." "Same," Ramos whispered. My stomach turned. "Could be a coincidence?" Silva snapped. 4 graves, 4 full names, 4 correct birthdays, matching the rescue unit that just showed up? That's not a coincidence. That's a threat. The fog thickened around my legs. I looked down. There were footprints all around my grave. Not mine. Bare. The impressions were too thin, too long, toes splayed like the feet were stiff. They circled my headstone, crossed over the empty plot in front of it, then radiated outward, disappearing between the other graves. "Marcos, status?" Torres asked. "I'm fine," I lied. "But someone's been walking around my stone. No boots, no shoes." "Stop reading them," Silva said. His bravado was gone. "We find the hikers, we get out. Whoever carved this garbage has a sick sense of humor." A radio hissed with static, then cleared. "Help!" The voice was thin, metallic. "Identify yourself," Torres said instantly. "This is Rescue Unit North. Who's speaking?" Silence. Then, louder. "Help! We're still here!" The sound seemed to come from everywhere. I couldn't tell if it was through the radio or the air itself. "Give us your position," I said. "Landmarks. Can you see the cemetery?" "We never left," the voice replied. I realized it wasn't a single voice. It was several, layered. Some male, some female. One sounded like a child. They all spoke together, slightly out of sync. "We never left. We never left. We never—" My fingers tightened around the radio. "Torres, that transmission? Not coming from any registered frequency," he said quickly. "I can't trace it." The ground under my boots trembled. Just a little, a shiver, like something below had shifted. Gravel rolled between the graves. A headstone a few meters away tilted further to the side with a soft, gritty sigh. "Did you feel that?" Ramos asked, voice high. "Probably a small slide," Torres said. But he didn't sound certain anymore. I moved toward the center of the cemetery where the stones grew denser. My headlamp caught something ahead. 3 graves in a neat row. Fresher earth. Cleaner edges. I knew, before I saw the names, that they belonged to the missing hikers. I knelt. There they were. Full names, partially matching the report. Same ages. Wrong dates, though. They all died a month ago, according to the stones. "But they called in today," I whispered. "They radioed. Today." My light flickered. The footprints around these graves were deeper, more frantic. Some impressions showed the toes dug hard into the soil, like someone bracing to be pulled away, or trying to hold on. "Torres?" I said. "What date did command say the distress signal was logged?" "Tonight," he answered. 032. Why? "These graves say our hikers died weeks ago." He didn't respond. The radio crackled. "You came for us," the layered voices said. "So now you stay with us." Dozens of headstones creaked at once. I watched in horror as some of them shifted a few centimeters, scraping small furrows in the soil. It was the slightest movement, but enough to prove they weren't as rooted as they should be. The earth between my boots cracked. A thin, pale hand pushed through. Not bone, not exactly flesh. Something in between. Fingers blindly searched the air, dragging long clumps of dirt with them. I jumped back. Hands burst from the ground around the hikers' 3 graves, clutching at nothing, clawing at the sky, then freezing in strange, desperate positions. "Regroup at the entry point," Torres shouted. "Now!" I ran. The cemetery blurred around me, stones like teeth, fog like a closing throat. I followed the memory of our own footprints, but they seemed to twist, circle back, cross themselves. I saw my own grave again. The death date was no longer blank. It read today. "Torres, I can't find the edge," I gasped. "Just keep moving," he yelled. "Don't stop." His voice cut off, static. "Torres?" I shouted. "Silva? Ramos?" Nothing. Then, slowly, 3 new names faded into the edges of my vision, carved on stones I knew hadn't been there before. Torres, Silva, Ramos. I spun in a circle. Graves. Just graves. No bodies. No blood. No gear. No teammates. The radio hissed. "Help!" The layered voices said again. "We're still here. We never left." I don't know how I got out. The next thing I remember clearly is stumbling down the mountain track alone, dawn just touching the horizon, my lungs burning, my boots torn. A second rescue team found me hours later, wandering in circles below the tree line. They never found Torres, Silva, or Ramos. They told command that I was in shock, that I misread the stones, that cold and fear and fatigue made me hallucinate. Maybe they're right. Maybe the cemetery didn't move. Maybe the graves never had our names. Maybe the hands that scraped the air were tree roots shaped like fingers. But sometimes, when I check the mission reports, the digital files look wrong. On the list of missing, there are 4 names. The 4th is mine. And in the comments field, someone has added a line: recovered, body never located. Location: Forgotten Mountain Cemetery. No one in the office admits to writing it. I'm a cartographer. I make maps for climbers, hikers, anyone willing to pay for reliable altitude data and accurate hazard markings. I'd never heard of the cemetery until my clients started disappearing. The first was a group of 3 semi-pro climbers from Europe. They bought one of my custom North Ridge maps, ignored my suggestion for a safer route, and went straight up along a contour line that brushed past an old marker. FMC, Forgotten Mountain Cemetery. I'd inherited that label from maps decades old, along with several others. Old mine, collapsed hut, unstable ledge. It was a curiosity, nothing more. They never came back. Search teams found nothing. No camp, no bodies, only a few scraps of bright fabric snagged on rock near the ridge. The second case was a pair of local hikers. They used my newer digital map, one I'd personally updated the week before. They vanished in almost the same area. The third time it happened, I stopped trusting coincidence. I hiked up myself. The air felt thin even below the snowline, like the mountain was taking more oxygen than it should. I followed my own GPS points along the route people shouldn't be using, watching the landscape shift just enough to unsettle me. Rocks weren't where I'd marked them. The shape of one cliff face was subtly wrong. A path that should have zigzagged was straight, while another had vanished under a slide that wasn't on my last satellite images. Still, the coordinates never lied. The cemetery was exactly where the old maps said it would be. It sat on a flattened ridge, tucked against a towering rock wall, like someone had carved out part of the mountain just to bury people. Low stone markers jutted from the ground in messy rows. At first I thought I was alone. Then I saw the drone. It lay broken near the edge of the cemetery. Its rotors snapped, its camera cracked. I recognized the model. Small, high-end, popular with climbers who like to film themselves. One of my vanished clients had posted a photo of the same drone before their last trip. I picked it up. The camera's memory card was still in place. I pocketed it and stepped into the cemetery. The temperature dropped 3 degrees on my handheld meter. "This is cartography, not ghost hunting," I muttered, if only to hear a voice. I started walking the perimeter first, noting the number of graves, their distances from the edge, their orientation. The stones were rough, simple, some hand-carved, some almost natural-looking. Near the far end, I noticed something strange. Several graves sat at odd angles, the soil at their bases raw and turned, as if they'd been wrenched out of the ground and shoved back in somewhere else. A few lay completely tipped over, their bodies, if they had any, cracked from the impact. "Landslide?" I murmured. But there was no slide path, no scarring on the ground, just displaced stones. Around the most recently moved graves, the soil was laced with footprints. Not mine. Deep impressions, as if made by someone carrying heavy weight. They went in circles, overlapping, then trailed off into the cemetery's center, and stopped. No return path. The wind didn't blow up there. It just moved gently, from one side of the ridge to the other, like breath. I knelt by one of the newer-looking stones. The engraving was sharp. The name belonged to one of my lost clients. So did the date of birth. The date of death was wrong. It was next week. I checked the others. All 3 members of the first lost climbing team were there. Names, dates of birth, different dates of death, but all in the future. All close. My throat tightened. "This is sick," I whispered. "Someone's carving memorials before accidents happen. But how did they know their birthdays? Their exact spelling? And why here, in a place nobody was supposed to visit?" I circled back toward the center of the cemetery, my boots crunching on frost. A headstone caught my eye. Not because it looked new, but because it was completely clean. No lichen, no moss, no dust. My name was on it. I stared at the letters, neatly carved. Jonah Ellis. Birth date. Correct. Death date. Blank. My pulse roared in my ears. I took a step back, then forced myself to step closer again just to prove I could. "That's enough," I said aloud. "I get it. Someone wants to scare off visitors. Congratulations." The ground beneath my feet felt hollow. Not like rock, like wood over a crawl space. I knelt and pressed my ear to the soil. Nothing. Then, faintly, a sound. Not scratching, not tapping. Breathing. I jerked back so fast I almost fell into another grave. My GPS beeped. I glanced at the screen. The coordinates were normal. But the map overlay, the base image I'd loaded from my own software, was changing. Slowly, pixel by pixel, new markers appeared. Graves. Hundreds of tiny icons bloomed on the screen exactly where I stood, forming a pattern that matched the cemetery's layout. I hadn't drawn them. And then, as I watched, one more marker appeared at the center. Label: Ellis, Jonah. I backed up, heart hammering. Signal interference, I told myself. Hack, glitch. Someone's messing with the data. I shut the GPS off. The screen stayed on. I dropped it. The device landed face up, the glow stark against the dirt. The map view zoomed in on its own, centering on my marker, the digital grave icon pulsing gently. The date associated with my name updated, numbers flickering like they were being typed by an invisible hand. Today. A wind rose, sudden and sharp, pushing against my back, nudging me toward my headstone. The cemetery seemed to tilt, the horizon bending. "No," I said. "I'm leaving." I stepped toward the edge of the ridge, toward where I'd come up. My boot landed in a footprint that wasn't mine. The fit was exact. My other foot found another. It was like stepping into someone else's steps, someone who had gone this way before, someone who hadn't returned. The wind pushed harder. Behind me, stones scraped. I turned. Graves were moving. Not much, only centimeters, but enough that I could see them realign, shifting in small jerks. Paths between them narrowed, rearranged. The place was reshaping itself, closing ranks. At the far end, a row of stones stood up from where they'd toppled, like teeth in a closing mouth. I ran. I didn't care about preserving my sense of direction. I just needed distance between myself and my own headstone. The problem was, every way I turned, it felt like I was running past it again. Same stone. Same name. I couldn't tell if it was multiplying or if the cemetery was folding in on me. Somewhere in the chaos, my foot hit something hard. I crashed to my knees. The drone dropped from my pocket, skidding across the frost. The camera, cracked but somehow functional, blinked a tiny light and whirred weakly. It powered on. The tiny built-in screen came to life, showing the last recorded view. It was the cemetery from above, filmed in clean daylight. Stones in orderly chaos, a few moving dots, people, the climbers, walking between the rows. I watched the footage as the climbers approached their own graves. They didn't seem to notice. My GPS marker appeared on the drone's display, a little blip converging with theirs. The timestamp was from last week, before I'd even decided to come up the mountain. The video glitched. For a second, I saw myself standing in the cemetery, looking down at a stone with my name on it. The timestamp for that frame was dated tomorrow. The mountain pressed in. I grabbed the drone and the GPS and ran again, not caring where, not thinking. At some point, the graves thinned, the ground tilted, and I found myself on a steep slope of scree and scrub. I didn't stop until trees appeared, until the air felt like air again, not a held breath. By the time I reached my truck, the GPS was dead. The drone too. No amount of charging or cable swapping brought them back. But when I got home, my mapping software had updated without permission. A new layer sat over the North Ridge, a high-resolution render of the cemetery, accurate down to individual stones. Right in the middle, there was an extra grave not present on any older map. It had my name, date of death, blank. Whenever I try to delete that layer, the program freezes. When I reboot, it's still there. And every night, just after midnight, the date on my grave changes automatically, counting down.